Dragon Riders, Kaze no Kaeru, by Night Dragon 0. The Charizard watched solemnly as it hit the ground. He gave me a nod and flew down, probably to examine the body. He was clutching his bleeding chest, although trying not to show that it hurt. I collapsed as Ogwell approached me. "Jade, are you all right?" "Yeah, sort of," I replied. "If you call this all right." Though exhausted and injured, the rest of the Pokemon came towards us, and I knew that was to pretty much stare at me in amazement. Dracia chose that moment to pop up and came hovering over. "Hey Jade, what happened to you?" the Dragonair asked. "Don't ask. I just did." "Hey, people!" Firestorm came flying back, saving me from having to continue the conversation. "Take a look at this!" The Charizard opened his palm and showed us a small device. "I think it's a communication device of some sort," I said, taking it for a closer look. "It was stuck in that Ursaring's ear," Firestorm spoke, confirming my suspicions. "High technology with a not-so-usual Pokemon," I muttered. "Which means Alagard's involved in this," Dracia concluded. Alagard, Night Slice's father, leader of a highly intelligent Pokemon renegade group, and also one of our greatest enemies. As of yet, that was. It was hard to tell what his true intentions were, but they usually didn't meet ours very well, and practically all of our confrontations in the past had ended in fights. It was hard to believe, but if I could swallow the whole Dragon Gods thing here and now, turning into Pokemon and stuff, then this wasn't much of a problem. "That seems to be the best possibility," I agreed. "And it also means that we should get moving. Chris and the others are still missing, and I don't think I'm in the mood to go tangling around with his bunch." "At least the big brown bear's dead," Firestorm said, pointing over the cliff, "so he won't be passing any more information around. Unless you want to go flying, the fastest way to Cinnabar Island is by ferry. However," Ogwell carefully ran his hand along my newly formed wings, "people are easily frightened by what they see." "He's got a point," Dracia nodded. "Storm's still a little under the weather, so I don't want to make him fly all the way," I said. "I can take it." Firestorm insisted, before he started coughing, spewing out flames randomly. Everyone jumped back several feet to avoid being scorched. "No, you can't," Dracia scolded, "and the fights haven't been doing good for you either." "But—" "Sit down and shut up!" she yelled. "Yes, ma'am," Firestorm replied meekly, cringing. "Fortunately, the solution is simple," Ogwell suddenly spoke. Everyone turned towards him as he pulled off his cloak. "It so happens that people are also easily deceived by what they don't see." Night Slice's perspective. I carefully examined the shiny, polished blade as I walked along the forest trail. Just a few hours since I'd left the Fuchsia Gym, and I was already beginning to feel nervous. In those few hours, I'd made a lot of decisions about what I was going to be doing from now on, and not all of those were pleasant ones. After getting my wounded hand cleaned up and bandaged, I'd sat down with Koga and told my whole story, about Chris, Firestorm, the others, and myself, what we'd been doing and what we'd been through, and the recent events. I really didn't know what he thought of it, but he was patient and listened to every part until the end. I broke down and cried at that point, feeling the whole mess was my fault. Of course he tried his best to comfort me. Koga had, in turn, told me that his fellow gym leader, Sabrina, another one of our allies, had contacted him several days earlier. She'd had a vision about a strange disturbance in his area and requested him to await the coming of a stranger who was a friend, a human who was not. It was about me, of course. Koga had agreed to help me on my journey. He not only provided me with some travel supplies, but also booked me a train ticket for a nearby place called Sunnytown to Cherry Grove City in Johto. I knew I'd never be able to repay him, but he'd simply reminded me that, no matter what, we'd always have friends. Both Sabrina and himself would be keeping their eyes peeled for anything that could help me. As a final request, I asked for a weapon, a sword, something that I felt comfortable with, rather than a tranquilizer gun. He'd given me the look of a father whose child had just asked for something very expensive, but he still brought out the sword that I was now holding in my hand. It was a beautiful design, a well-made blade with a black and red handle in the shape of a dragon. Looking at it brought my mind back to the time when I'd lost control of the Night Blazer and attacked Chris, shattering her sword. I pushed the thought aside and concentrated on the present. So here I was now, Pokeballs on my belt, backpack on my back, sword by my side, and a long journey ahead. "Chris, just hang on. Somehow, someway, I'll find you again, and then I'll make Team Rocket pay." My fist clenched automatically. Still, Koga's final words of advice to me came back to my mind. "Don't let anger control you. Vengeance may be sweet, but it cuts both ways. At that moment, I stopped. I was sure I'd heard a sound. At first it was just the chittering of forest insects. However, I waited until I had heard it again. It was a girl, and she was screaming for help. Jade's perspective. Thanks a lot for your help, Ogwell, I said, as I leaned on the railing at the ship's starboard side. Think nothing of it, he smiled. After all, it seems I've gotten myself into quite some adventure here, so I'm obliged to do something. You know, that sounds a lot like me when I first hooked up with Chris. I had managed to hold my wings down under my arms and cross them around my chest level. Ogwell had loaned me his cloak, which I'd put on to hide the wings, and gloves on my hands to hide the claws. The tail had proved difficult, but I'd managed to control it enough and to keep it still hidden in my pants without burning them. Ogwell had gotten the tickets, and now we were on the ferry headed to Cinnabar Island. The ship had a mini Pokemon Center set up below deck, and I'd left Firestorm there for treatment. With the other Pokemon back in their Pokeballs, Ogwell, Sarek the Vaporeon, and myself had gone onto the deck for some fresh air. As we stood on the deck, enjoying the breeze, Ogwell got out his seashell flute and began to play a song. That was Melodies of Life from Final Fantasy IX, I gasped. It's really good. Thank you. I haven't really been practicing that one much, Ogwell admitted. But listen to this one, which is a Lapras melody. He played another pleasing tune, which really did resemble the song of Lapras. You ever tried a Dragonair song? I asked, releasing Dracia. Let me see if I can catch on, Ogwell said, taking up his flute. Dracia, would you mind giving our friend a little melody to follow? Finally, someone who appreciates my musical talent, the Dragonair whispered, winking. Try this. She sang several notes and allowed Ogwell to follow. He caught on very quickly, and soon Ogwell was playing a near-perfect imitation of the Dragonair song. I'm really impressed, Dracia admitted once he was done. For a human, you're very good at it. I'd swear you were another Dragonair yourself. Thanks. The silver-haired man smiled, stroking his head. But I still have to practice and improve. Ogwell brought his flute up again and began to play the song that he'd been playing when we first met. As I stood listening to the song, watching the waves spreading over the endless sea, it finally hit me about where I'd heard it before. That's it! I cried, snapping my fingers, claws. From the legend, the song of the water's great guardian, Lugia. How did you know that was a guardian song? Ogwell asked, looking a little surprised. When I was a kid, my dad took me to this island in the Orange Archipelago, which was where they had this annual festival to honor the legend, I explained. They get a Pokemon trainer to collect these spheres from 3 islands and bring them to a designated location, to tame the beast of the sea, as they say. And it happened that I was the lucky Pokemon trainer. I think I was around 10 or 11 then. Dracia, do you remember? I took you between the islands, the Dragonair nodded. That's certainly very interesting, Ogwell smiled. But aren't you from the Orange Islands? I asked. Yes, but I came from a small fishing and farming village. We have to spend a lot of time working since we live off of what we can catch and grow. I was taught this song by one of the village elders. They seemed to agree that I had a great talent in music, so they wanted me to go out and learn from lands beyond my home. From there, that's where we met. I see, I said, nodding. As I turned back to look at the sea again, I heard Ogwell breathe a sigh of relief. I didn't think much of it, and I assumed that he was just tired after playing for so long. Firestorm's perspective. The rest of the sea travel was uneventful, at least for Jade and the others. As for me, I was miserable, spending my time in front of the ship's doctor. Sure, he'd said I just had an allergic reaction, some cuts and a broken rib, but he was trying to stuff a bunch of pills up my mouth. And he called himself a doctor? Oh boy, Jade and Dracia are going to be laughing at this for weeks to come. At least I walked out of there with just a bandage across my chest. Anyway, once we arrived on Cinnabar Island, Jade led us through the tourist spots to the residential area. He brought us up a short pathway to an elegant-looking building and rang the doorbell. Looks like your uncle can really afford something pretty nice, I muttered. Yeah, he knows how to invest his money well, Jade replied. A brown-haired man with a mustache opened the door. Jade? Hey, Uncle Blaine, Jade said, in an extremely loud and cheerful voice. He walked up and slapped his uncle on the back, causing him to grunt in pain. How you doing, old man? Still wearing wigs and playing with riddles? Jade reached up and pulled Blaine's wig off, revealing his bald head. Hey, Jade, I told you not to do that, the old man scolded. Oh, yeah, I forgot, Jade grinned. We had the mustache, too. Jade promptly yanked the fake mustache off. Ow! Ow! Jade, can you behave yourself in front of your friends? Lighten up, old man. That stress of being a gym leader is getting to you. Jade's cheerful tone changed slightly. But I need to talk to you about something. Not out here, but down in the lab. It's very important. It's alright with me, Blaine nodded. Why don't you... Guys, meet my uncle, Blaine. Jade cut him off, gesturing towards us. This is Ogwell, Firestorm the Charizard, and Serac the Vaporeon. You guys come in and make yourselves at home while I get the lab set up for my old man here. With that, Jade walked in, tossing his backpack to the side, and ran down to the lower level. He's unusually energetic, Blaine commented. He's been undergoing some changes lately, sir, Ogwell said, emphasizing the word changes. And we believe you have the knowledge to aid us. I'll do whatever I can, Blaine nodded. We best show you downstairs. The two humans left, leaving Serac and me. The shy Vaporeon took a spot on the carpet and lay down. Meanwhile, Dracia popped out and materialized next to me. That old man's in for a scare, she laughed. Just how do you keep doing that? I asked. She lives for stuff like that. A Pokemon voice came from the next room. You stick around with a Joker and you're bound to pick up a few jokes. Magmar? I gasped. The fire Pokemon poked his head out from the doorway. Jade's Magmar, the one who had previously left our group. Long time no see, Storm. What are you doing here? Obvious, isn't it? Dracia asked. That trade Jade did with his uncle. Why else do you think he'd let this flamehead go so easily? I see. Firestorm. Ogwell came up to the room. They need you down here. On my way. Meanwhile, I'll let the other Pokemon out, he said, walking over to Jade's backpack. They could use the break, too. The lab was like any I'd seen before, just a smaller scale. Tables, odd machines, computers. A chilling feeling that reminded me of the lab I'd grown up in. Blaine was hunched over a microscope, with Jade looking over his shoulder. Jade had removed Ogwell's cloak, now revealing his wings. The researcher pushed a few buttons on a computer next to him and gasped. That confirms it, he muttered. Charizard DNA is in your blood, Jade. Wow, like I need even more surprises, Jade sighed. Oh, Storm, you're here. We've been doing some research, and we happen to need a sample of your blood. I held out my arm and allowed him to jab a syringe in and take a sample. Jade passed it to his uncle and turned back to me. Well, he thinks the reason I'm, turning into a Charizard is that I somehow got DNA into my blood and it seems to be taking over my human side. When did that happen? I whispered as quietly as possible, not wanting Blaine to overhear. You think I know that? But the thing is... Jade, Blaine interrupted us. Your suspicions were right. This Charizard's blood sample, it's got human DNA in it. For a moment, both Jade and I stared at each other, not sure of what to do. What? Forgetting everything, I roared so loudly that everyone else came running down.